part two of the Audio TXDAW Master Blaster class. This is the VST manipulation video. So we're going to jump right into it. If you haven't watched part one, you need to do that. Here we go. Cakewalk, banana. Go ahead and open banana and cakewalk. And what I'm going to actually do is I'm going to post a preloaded CWP. Now, when I talk about a CWP file, I'm referring to the Cakewalk program file. It's a launch file, and it will open Cakewalk with all the VSTs preloaded, but they will not be edited. You really need to start flat. Been thinking about this, and that was the wrong approach. You can use the other one if you want to. Maybe it'll work, maybe it won't, but everybody's voice is different. Everybody's looking for a different sound. Everybody, you could be using a different microphone. So what I'm going to show you now is how to load up the VSTs and how to edit them and tweak your sound in the DAW. Okay. First thing you want to do is come over to Cakewalk, this FX panel right here. Hit the little plus sign. Insert audio effects. First thing I'm going to do is go to uncategorize. Your plugins may be in a different place. I'm going to pull in the EQ Unlimited. Okay, so one of the things I wanted to show you about the EQ Unlimited is that a few of the things, when you look at this EQ, these sliders are boost and cut. They have a boost and cut function, and underneath each slider you will see a frequency. Now, this slider will boost and cut either the center frequency. Keep in mind that depending on the Q, which is the bandwidth, graphic equalizers don't just boost or cut the center frequency, they boost a group of frequencies on either side, upper, higher or lower. Now you can adjust that by going to the second knob down. This is the Q, basically. This is the bandwidth, so you can adjust the bandwidth. I'm not going to go too deep into that, but this takes time, so be patient. All right, so let's get started. I'm going to get my audio on here so I can hear what's happening. So what you want to do, let's say you're starting with EQ. You work on each individual plugin at a time when you bring them in. Don't just bring in all the plugins and start tweaking all over the place. Everything has a flow. So I've talked about it before. Audio is like water. So it has a start point and an end point. So if you think about this, it'll help you understand. Now, again, this is layman's point of view for people who know nothing about this. So if you think about audio, right, and then you think about water. Well, let's say you have a well. That's your microphone. You talk into the microphone, and that water flows up from the well into, let's say, a series of filters. Let's say you have a water softener, you have a sediment filter. Well, all of those are your VST plugins. And by the time it finally gets to the kitchen sink, and your audio has gotten all the way to the kitchen sink, that's the output. That's the end result. Hopefully you got nice clean water, right? Same thing with audio. It has a start point and an end point. So if you think of it that way, it'll help you make decisions as to what plugins to use and how to manipulate them. Always start at the beginning and move through towards the end. Don't start in the middle. Don't start at the end. If you want to be successful, that's how you do it. So that being said, I'm going to get my audio on here. Test, 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 test. So we'll do a little tweaking. And it's hard for me to listen to myself, so I'm going to just set it up. I'm going to go fast, and I'm going to set it up to what I think sounds okay. Now, there is no gate, there's no exciter, there's no downward expander, there's no compression or limiting yet. There's no reverb. Okay, so if I wanted to run reverb. Some people don't like it. I like it. Provides a little room ambience. I have a lot of dampening in this room, and it's very very dead. It tends to sound unnatural. So I like a little, just a hint. I don't like it to sound like an artifact, but we'll get into that. All right, I'm digressing as usual. So let's get this on, and I'll start putting some tweaks in. Let's say I'm gonna run, oh, 4 kilohertz wide, right? So I'm gonna just put a bump up here. Test, 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 testing, 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 test, test. So knowing how the transceiver interprets the audio, oftentimes it is not what you're hearing. Remember, these transceivers, even in a non, is not studio grade. It's not like a recording studio. So you will see me do things based upon my personal preference that you may shake your head and go, "Well, I don't understand why he's doing that." But see, I know how my radios behave, what they put out. All right, here we go. So let's put a boost at about 1600. I'm going to bring up, I'm going to put a little bump at 500 and 630. So I'll put a little bump up in there. And I'm a baritone, so I have a very low voice. And so I'm always cautious about this 250 hertz to like 160 hertz. Tends to get a little muddy. So, but you don't want to pull too much of that out, because if someone's listening at 300 hertz, they're not going to hear that big bottom end. I'm sorry, not 300 hertz, 3 kilohertz, right? So we'll just leave that there. I'm going to jump down to about 50 hertz, and I'm going to put a little bump right in here. Let's put a bump in 63 hertz, and you can hear it starting to come in. So I just put a little touch at 40 hertz. And let's see. Well, let's do an extreme cut just to see what it sounds like at 250 hertz. So you can hear that bottom end. See how the bottom end came in? Just put a little dip right there. I'm going for the big bodacious sound here. So let's do 200 hertz. Test 1 2, test testing 1 2, test. You hear that bottom end, that real subwoofer bottom end. She's getting there, just with that little amount of tweaking. So I'll bring these back up, because I don't want it to sound too brittle. Most often people are listening on a conventional transceiver, and they're not able to listen below 100 hertz. Sometimes they're not even listening down to 100 hertz. So, okay, well, we'll call that kind of done for now. Let's bring in the Brit presser, which is a limiter and compressor. Okay, so I want this quick. I want this snappy, quick recovery. So this is the compressor right here, and this is the limiter on the top. So let's bring this to there. I'm going to leave the compression at 3-to-1. All right, because I do want some compression. So let's bring this knob right here is the level of compression. So if you left click and drag it down, test, 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 you'll see the compression starting to come in. And you'll see that it's smoothing out quite a bit. That smoothed it out. So if I bypass the Brit presser, just push this little power button on the effects chain, well, there's the Brit presser disengaged. So you can see you lose a little bit of, it's louder. You lose a little bit of a control, but you can correct that with this off. So I'm going to apply a little bit of limiting. So get it back on. Test 1, 2, testing. So I'm going to drop this down a little bit. Let's go back down. Now I'm going to bring in the limiter. So let's bring in the limiter. Test 1, 2, test. Test 1, 2, test 1, 2. So if you can't get the limiter to engage and it's up to 7, now you have to reopen the EQ and you have to bring the EQ drive up, which will increase, it will increase the signal going into the Brit presser. So once that's done, you have to go back to the Brit presser. Remember, it's all about signal flow. And let's see. Test 1, 2. That's a lot of compression. So now I can roll this back off. Test 1, 2. Test. Test 1, 2. Hear how it's getting better? And you can bring this level up. I'm sorry, that was the limiter. I wanted the limiter up. I'm backwards. Now we can bring the compression down. There we go. There we go. Now we're getting up there. Okay, let's bring compression down. Test 1, 2, test. Test 1, 2, audio 1, 2, check. Let's put a little bit more gain coming into the Brit presser. Let's try that. Reopen the Brit presser. Now, let me show you something. Some of these plugins have a thumbtack right here in the top right-hand corner. Go ahead and click that, and it will keep that VST open. Okay? So that doesn't sound too bad already. I mean, I'd be happy with that on the radio. It'd probably sound dynamite on the radio. She's going to get better. All right, so let's add another one. So let's add the modern exciter. Test 1, 2, test. Test 1, 2. Now, if you look at the exciter here, I'm sorry, I'm listening to myself in the cans. You'll notice that these meters aren't moving. We can fix that. So what you want to do is you want to grab, this is the output of the Brit presser right here. You want to left click and drag this up. Here we go. We're coming up. Test 1, 2, test. 1, 2, test. Hey, that's not sounding too bad, right? We're still low. You're going to have to turn your volume down because everything's going to come up. Testing. 1, 2, test. Now we have meter movement. Very cool. What I do with the exciter is, I'll show you. I'll bring this up and I'll start at 12 o'clock, the balance of it. And let's bring the output up so we get a pretty good deflection on the meter. So we're coming up. Test 1, 2, test. Audio 1, 2, test. Testing 1, 2, audio 1, 2, check. Testing 1, 2. That's probably pretty good right there. Now what we want to do is we want to work on the low and the high. So I'm going to bring the low up. You should hear that bottom. Here it comes. Here it comes, baby. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. She's starting to stomp now. You got that voodoo bottom end. Oh, yeah. She's starting to get there. Now, you'll notice that these meters are going to start clipping. So you got to continually work this back. Let's work the output back down. Now we're going to bring the high end up. All right, so here comes the high end. You're going to hear it brighten up. Test 1, 2, test. Audio 1, 2, test. Testing 1, 2. So there's the high end right there. All right. That is not too shabby. So you can see what happens with the balance. When I bring let's bring the balance down to 9 o'clock. So we're going to go down. And there's the balance at 9 o'clock. You can hear it gets very thumpy. Going back the output down a little bit. Now we're going to go back up to 12 o'clock. And you're going to hear hear that mid-range and high end start coming in. The vocal presence. You don't want to remove that. You got to have a lot of presence probably a little low on the high end. So I'm going to bring that back up. And let's go to 3 o'clock on the balance, and you should hear it thin out. So there it goes, starting to thin out. So that's a much smoother type of audio. Has more mid-range presence. So I'm going to bring the high up a little more. I'm going to bring the low up. See if I can get that low back. Test 1 2. Audio 1 2. Check. Testing 1 2. There we go. That's some pretty bodacious bottom end right there. We'll go with that. Let's go back up here to that's not too bad. The limiter is really crushing it, which is good because it's going to keep you from overshoot. You don't want to overshoot. That's why I placed the limiter and compressor in the beginning, because I want to get the rest of the plugins under control. You can see that the meters on the exciter are really under control here. So I'm going to roll the balance back a little bit. So let's go back to about, it's going to get very voodoo-ish. So let's go back to, you hear that? Hear that? Oh, that's nice. That is really nice. I like that. Test 1 2, test. Let's bring the output back a little bit. I'm going to bring the balance back up. It's pretty wicked. Here we go. Not many plugins, right? Now we need to remove all ambient noise. So I want to make sure I'm not clipping anything. Test 1 2, test. Audio 1 2, testing 1 2. Okay, it looks good. So I'm going to hit the plus sign, insert audio effects. We need the modern expander. Bring the modern expander back in, and you can see we've got good deflection, good strength on the meter. So the first thing you want to do, this runs as a downward expander. So if you have fans or a noisy environment, this will strip pretty much 100% of the ambient noise off your audio without it affecting your audio. So I leave the attack on fast. This is your output. You adjust the output to keep this from clipping. See how that's a little hot? So we can come down a little bit on that already. I leave the attack on fast. The release, I speed that up a little bit. I usually run it between the plus and minus signs right here. The ratio, I set at maximum. Range, I set at 60 dB. And I set this all the way up as well. So as you're bringing your threshold up, you left click and drag up. Hear it? So it just completely crushed almost all of the ambient noise. Pretty cool, huh? That's the power of a downward expander. I mean, you could have a jet engine, I know I'm exaggerating, running right next to you and you ain't going to hear it in your audio. It's very helpful if you run a very hot microphone, like a large diaphragm studio condenser. You have to have this option. I don't use it when I'm on the rack because, one, I don't have a downward expander, and two, I have no noise in the shack, virtually zero noise. So, okay, test 1 2, audio 1 2, test. Next, what we want to do is we want to bring in a gate. Let's bring in the Sonitis gate. I set my attack at 0. Usually I try to run this hold. I will set, I don't know, around 30 milliseconds. The release, I will move this down to about 50 milliseconds. Try that. Good enough. Okay, this is your gating right here, the input. So again, you want to make sure none of these meters clip. Nothing is clipping. It's a little too tight. It's a little too tight. I'm going to bring this up. Test 1, 2. If you hear it start to chop, your audio start to chop, then it's too tight. Let's bring these up. Okay, now we're going to bring this slider up. And if you talk very soft, which I'm doing, very soft. Okay. You want to make sure the gate fully opens. But you don't want it kind of popping in and out. You know what I'm saying? So I'm just making a shh noise. So not quite enough downward expansion. So what I'll do is I'll thumbtack this, I'll pin it so it stays open, and then I'll reopen the downward expander. Okay, maybe I can go up a little bit on the threshold. Let's go up to here. Okay, that's not too bad. As I was doing this, that you can watch the meters on the gate, and you'll see them flicker. But you want to set the downward expander so that if you're not talking, it literally is those meters don't even move. So you'll notice if I stop talking and you watch the meters on the gate, there will be absolutely no signal there. Here we go, stopping. There you go. So that's roughly a little bit goes a long way with this stuff, just to let you know. All right, next in line, let's do a little room ambience. How's that? So we need the ambience plugin. I don't know where it is. There it is, right there. Whoop. Come on now. Right there. Holy cow. This is going to take a little bit of work. Okay. First thing I want you to notice on this, I put it in bypass, is this is completely bass backwards. You never want this. So the wet, the slider right here is way the heck up. So you want to reverse that. Bring the dry up, good and strong, and the wet all the way back. Your decay is right here, the time. So that's the length of the reverb. And then, of course, you got a bunch of settings in here. Distortion, diffusion. Then you got the shape, the size. So I'm going to go ahead and re-engage it. Test 1, 2, check. Testing. And bring the wet up. There we go. Okay, so the wet's up there. So now we need to edit it so you don't sound like you're in a cathedral. Right? So let's bring the width down a little bit. Check 1, 2, check. And let's bring the size down. Check. Testing. 1, 2, check. Check. 1, 2, check. Audio. 1, 2. Test 1, 2. Audio. 1, 2, check. Testing. Looks like I'm starting to clip. So let's open. See if the gate is clipping. Test 1, 2. Test. The gate is not clipping. So it's something to do with the output of the gate. So you can just drop the output of the gate a little bit to get that back under control right here. All right, that's the gain on the gate. Now, when you change that, you may remember everything after that changes. So, okay, test, check. That's not bad. Try the diffusion, check. Check 1, 2, check. This tight, it doesn't really have an effect, you know. This is the EQ side right here, which is kind of cool. This is 77 hertz. That's completely impractical. So I really don't want that much reverb on the bass, on the bass side. That's set to, yeah, 77 hertz. That's too low. This is up around 8. But see, unless you're running 8 kilohertz wide, that's really not going to do anything, right? And unfortunately, I really don't know. I don't know how to change that. There's got to be a way to change that, but whatever. All right. Let's just see if we can get it to sound somewhat decent. So it may be okay. Maybe it's just a little too wet. You need to decrease the amount of effects. So if I bring it up, you'll hear it get way. The room is way too big. Check, 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 check. Testing 1 2 check. See how that's almost very natural sounding? I like that. Maybe still a little bit too hot. Check, check. Testing 1 2 check. Audio 1 2 check. So if I put it in bypass, you'll see what happens. Test 1 2 check. Bypass check 1 2 audio. See how a little bit goes a long way. You get used to it, and then you think, oh yeah, well, let me put it in bypass and see what happens. Then you realize you got way too much. So this is back on. Test 1 2 check. Audio 1 2 check. Off. Test 1 2 audio 1 2. Test 1 2 audio check. 1 2 audio 1 2 check. Testing. It's not bad. It's not bad. Check. Test 1 2 check. Audio. Test 1 2 check. See, huge difference just with that little amount of reverb. Doesn't take much. So okay, that pretty much. It's still heavy. I can hear it. Check. That pretty much does it. So I give you an idea of how to manipulate the plugins and how to set it up. Try different plugins. This is not the end all. This will just get you up and going. And when I run the DAW, this is actually all I run. I don't run anything else. So yeah, pretty cool. Don't forget that every single thing you change ahead of each plugin, you have to go in and change the drive level generally. So check 1 2 check 1 2 audio. Excuse me, got the burps. Let's leave that there, and I'm going to actually reduce the amount of compression just slightly. I just heard it. You'll notice that that too much compression, limiting, can be destructive to your audio. So you reopen the exciter. And I will bring this up just a touch, and you can see the exciter is it's getting smoked. So don't be afraid to go in and check your drive levels. Always check your drive levels. All right, so I'm going to bring this down. Let's bring this down. Oh yeah. Bring this down to about 12 o'clock. Bring the output back. Test, audio, 1 2, check. Testing, 1 2. That through a transceiver will rip ass. I'm telling you right now. So, that's it. Pretty simple, right? All right, that concludes. Let me kill this. That concludes the part 2 of VST manipulation. Again, go find some VSTs and play. You'll probably find some great VSTs out there. I know the modern VSTs, just type in modern. Go to the link on the web page on VST, DAW VST downloads page. And I believe I have a link on there for all of the modern plugins. There are some dynamite plugins in there, man. I'd love to play with. I just don't have the time. Awesome. All right. 7-3. We'll catch you guys later. Stay tuned for part 3. It's a coming.